Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good. Yeah. Thank you. Hopefully you're prepared today with your umbrella or your raincoat after yesterday. I know I am. My name is Jeff William. I'm the co-chair of this year's program committee. This morning, I'm pleased to introduce the 2026 Shaul G. Massry Distinguished Award recipient. This lectureship was established to honor Dr. Shaul Massry for his scientific achievements and his contributions to the kidney healthcare community and to the National Kidney Foundation. This year's recipient is Dr. Ann O'Hare. Dr. O'Hare is a nephrologist at the VA Puget Sound Healthcare System in Seattle and professor of medicine at the University of Washington, where she is the inaugural holder of the Bill Peckham Endowed Fund for Person-Centered Care. During the more than 2 decades that have passed since she completed her nephrology fellowship training, she's privileged to have been engaged in a compelling career-long process of learning how to care compassionately for people with kidney disease, a path shaped by lessons learned and insights gained from patients and their family members, from colleagues within and outside nephrology, from a variety of different research projects, and from ongoing personal reflection. Unfortunately, Ann is unable to join us today in New Orleans to accept her award in person, but I'm excited to say that she will still present a brief lecture virtually for us now. And this will be followed by a panel discussion led by Dr. Jane Schell with our amazing patients, Ms. Carrie Maxwell and Dr. Patrick G. And I will introduce them in a moment after Dr. O'Hare's talk. And they will be discussing the themes of AI and compassionate care. Today's talk is entitled, Will Artificial Intelligence Make Medicine More Human Again? And without further ado, please join me in congratulating and virtually welcoming our 2026 Shaul G. Massry Award winner, Dr. Ann O'Hare.
Hi, everybody. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak in honor of Shaul G. Massry. I'm very grateful to the National Kidney Foundation and to the meeting program committee for selecting me to deliver this lecture. I'm very sorry that I cannot be there in person. Unfortunately, my 90-year-old father, who lives in the UK, was scheduled for a cardiac valve replacement very close to the time of the meeting, and I had offered to be his primary caregiver, so I can't be there in person. What we're going to do is I'm going to record a shorter version of my lecture, and then Dr. Jane Schell has kindly agreed to lead a discussion afterward with the support of Patrick G. and Carrie Maxwell, two outstanding patient advocates who have also kindly agreed to participate. I hope you will enjoy the session. I'm envious, as I wish I could be there, especially for the discussion. Thank you. So welcome to the Shaul G. Massry Distinguished Lecture. Our topic today is, Will Artificial Intelligence Make Medicine More Human Again? These are my disclosures after over the last 3 years. I received some funding to attend meetings. I received research support from NIH and the VA, and I'm an employee of the VA. In this lecture, I hope to teach about the ways in which AI is impacting clinical practice. I'm hoping we can consider the implications of AI for person-centered care. The whole lecture is really about critically evaluating the promise that AI will make medicine more human again. In this presentation, you'll see a number of images that I conjured up using ChatGPT-4. In this instance, I said, please make an image of the disaster that is the US healthcare system. And as you will be familiar, the US healthcare system is one of the most expensive in the world in terms of per capita GDP, and actually delivers lower quality than health systems in other comparably developed countries. And that's sort of well known. What I think is actually the most paradoxical feature of the US healthcare system, and perhaps other modern healthcare systems also, is the moral distress and the indignities that those who become entangled with the system, whether it be patients, family members, clinicians, staff, what they experience as a result. with that, I'd just like to move to a slide really just showing how our US health system is really ripe for innovation. And many artificial intelligence companies, startups have recognized this and are really targeting healthcare. I think of the facts, for me, as a real symbol of the need and opportunity for innovation in our health system, at least in this health system that I work in. Fax machines are used very often. I sometimes wonder if maybe we should be just grateful that we're not using the telegram, but I think, clearly there's opportunity for innovation. This is a book written by Bob Wachter recently about current state of medical AI, and he titles it A Giant Leap. He doesn't necessarily commit to whether it's a leap forward or a leap backward, but it's a really good summary of the different ways in which AI is being used and taken up into healthcare, ranging from, sort of the more administrative tasks, such as pre-authorization agreements, requests, and also things like clinic scheduling, that kind of thing, but also being used in more sort of functions that are a little closer to the core of medicine. So, for example, AI chatbots are being used for patient interactions via the computer, where many of us are using AI scribes to transcribe our notes. In areas like radiology, pathology, AI is being used in image interpretation and analysis. And then, I think many of us are also using AI quite liberally in terms of knowledge seeking, often in real time, and also, used to generate patient handouts, those kinds of things. So being used in a lot of different ways already. And one of the things that I think has increased our readiness as healthcare providers and health system readiness to take up AI has been this idea that AI is going to do all of the things that eat up our time and sort of take us away from patient care, if you like, the medical scut work, and therefore create more time with patients, provide more time with patients. This is sort of the narrative that AI will make medicine more human again. Eric Topol, who's a cardiologist, wrote this book making precisely that argument in 2019. There are a few things that initially bothered me somewhat about this argument, because it kind of externalizes the problem. It says that we're not perhaps providing compassionate, person-centered care because there's just not enough time, and that if we had more time, we would do that. And I feel like that's really not owning at least our role as clinicians in this challenge, because we have a finite time with patients, whatever that is. We get to prioritize different things. And so to some extent, I think we need to own that. The other reason that it didn't sit very well with me was that I was about halfway through the book and I was reading a section on radiologists and how the job they do is essentially very soon going to be overtaken by AI. In fact, the Nobel Prize winner, Geoffrey Hinton, who was an expert in machine learning in 2016, so 3 years before this book was written, had the argument that radiology was really a sort of a dying specialty, and that everything that radiologists do could be overtaken by AI within about a decade. I mean, he's since gone back on that prediction. Topol didn't necessarily think it was going to lead to replacement of radiologists by AI, but he thought radiologists needed to pivot. And his suggestion was that radiologists, instead of interpreting images, move into the clinic and actually spend time talking to patients about the interpretation of their images, etc. Unfortunately for me, this kind of conjured up this image. I asked AI to make an image of a radiologist being dragged, kicking and screaming, and out of the dark radiology reading room into the cool light of clinic. For those who work in medicine, I think you can appreciate that this kind of solution really, I think, both underestimate the training and experience and motivation it takes to provide direct patient care, and also misses the point that we're really products of our own training. Radiologists have selected the work they do in many instances because direct patient care wasn't what they were interested in doing. So I thought this was really a gross simplification. Either way, radiologists are still finding lots of job opportunities, and they're still to be found in reading rooms. And this is a decade after Hinton's projections. So, I think this is a very simplistic view. I think how AI is integrated into our health system is quite hard for us to predict. I actually like to take a moment and go back to the mid-1800s, to Henry David Thoreau's book Walden, because he had many wise observations in this book. He took a sort of a 2+ year retreat in the woods of Massachusetts, just outside of Concord, where he lived. And I found this paragraph quite insightful. He was quite interested in modernity, and in particular the steam engine was one of the most prominent innovations that was just beginning in the mid-1800s. And he's sort of musing about traveling to the nearby town of Fitchburg. And he says, "I've learned that the swiftest traveler is he that goes afoot. I say to my friends, suppose we try to see who will get there first. The distance is 30 miles, the fare is 90 cents. That's almost a day's wages. Will I start now on foot and get there before night? You, meantime, have earned your fare and get there sometime tomorrow. So instead of going to Fitchburg, you'll be working here for the greater part of the day." And this is actually a very, in my opinion, very profound statement, because it conveys the reality that technological change really doesn't occur in a vacuum. There are usually trade-offs. It's usually coupled with other changes. In this case, working for a wage is a profound evolution. So I would say, in general, when it comes to technology, especially if we think about some of the innovations that have happened in medicine, we're not all that good at predicting their full impact. Like, take the electronic health record. I am old enough where I well remember challenges of having a paper medical record, and in particular, the time spent trying to chase down somebody's chart, eventually finding it in the hands of just, that colleague who was taking their sweet time to review all the other notes and write their own note, write their order. Clearly, the electronic health record is a major advance. Multiple people can now access the chart at any given time. And I think most of us would probably not want to go back to the days of paper charts. But, what about all the other things that happen? So, we spend probably less time on our feet, probably encounter our colleagues in the flesh less often, because we're sitting at our desks. And, not to mention the tyranny of the inbox, or, what is often called pajama time, the time spent after hours completing notes, orders, etc. So, again, I don't think necessarily predicted all of these things. And so I think in terms of thinking about AI, we should probably have some degree of skepticism or wariness about what the implications will be for our practice. One point I'd really like to make strongly is that medical care is actually quite complex. In his address to the Harvard Medical School, Francis Weld Peabody, who was a famous Boston physician at the turn of the century, ends this lecture by saying the secret of the care of the patient is in caring for the patient, which is a very, profound statement. And it really gets at the fact that our care should be directed at supporting the patient. It's actually very hard to deconstruct it into a series of actions, and we run into problems when we try to do that. And so, while we might think in terms of having AI do the work that we don't think we should be doing, the scut work, the work that has no direct benefits for our relationship with the patient, it takes us away from the patient. We like that idea, and certainly I don't want to be discouraging innovation that will make our lives and our jobs easier and improve care. But a lot of times, because we're dealing with human beings, and when caring for someone, it can be very powerful to just go that little bit out of our way to help that person. And that's often how we convey to patients how important they are, how important their care is to us. So we have to be careful, I think, to, in sort of automating some of our work, we have to be very careful not to remove opportunities to build relationships with patients. And I think at the core of this is compassion. You know, many of us went to medical school because of a desire to really do good and address the suffering of others. This diagram is on the x-axis you have understanding of another's experience, and on the y-axis you have a willingness to act to support. And so you can see a spectrum here from pity in the bottom left corner, which is a very sort of distancing kind of emotion, you know, those poor people, that poor person. Thank goodness, you know, that's not my problem. Sympathy is a little bit going further out. I feel for you. Empathy is I feel with you. And then beyond that is compassion, which I think of as empathy plus. So it's empathy plus a desire to address another's suffering, which is in many ways, you know, the pinnacle, I think, of patient care. One of the most important things I think to remember about compassion is that it benefits not just the recipient, but it benefits the person who is compassionate. It's a really, I think, amazing emotion or sentiment. I wanted to just give you a quick example of what I'm calling here compassion in action, just to illustrate some of that. My colleague in the upper left slide, Maggie Fleet at the Seattle VA, I saw her in her office some months ago at the end of a long day, and she was close to tears, and so I was talking with her a little bit about what had been going on, and she had spent the better part of the day trying to arrange for a patient's vascular access to be declotted, and the poor patient had spent the whole day in the waiting room, and there were all kinds of system barriers at our medical center in terms of getting his access declotted. So she was kind of at her wit's end, and I think just feeling bad both for herself and for the patient. A little bit later, she got the advice to send the patient to a local emergency room at Harborview Medical Center. This is a county hospital in Seattle. And so she called over to Harborview to talk to the interventional radiologist on call, explained the situation, introduced herself as Maggie Fleet. And the radiologist responded by saying, "Are you related to our Dr. Fleet?" And what she was saying was that Pat Fleet, who was Maggie's father, was a very beloved, respected nephrologist at Harborview his whole career. And he had passed away a few years ago. So needless to say, you know, this was very moving for Maggie, and they had a good conversation. And at the end of the conversation, the radiologist promised to take good care of the patient. I ran into the patient a few days later, and he also expressed gratitude to Dr. Fleet and the Harborview team. And I raise this as a sort of an example of how compassion is often hiding in the most unlikely places, you know. I mean, who would want to spend a day arranging for access to be declotted or the patient waiting for it? But in the end, there were rewards there. Probably Maggie will remember this experience the rest of her life. And the other point I think to be made is that when we think of exercising compassion, we're not just talking about patients. We're talking about our colleagues, staff at the hospital. You know, it's a very powerful emotion that really makes medicine magical. And it's very hard to know, but it's very hard to know where the opportunities are ahead of time. I like to think of this as thought experiment, where you had a perfectly functioning healthcare system. Imagine that. And every patient's need was completely taken care of. Maybe the metaphorical equivalent of the sick bay on the Starship Enterprise. But if every need is taken care of, it limits opportunities for compassion. You almost lead a little bit of friction in the system that allow you to go out of the way to make that patient's day a little bit better. You know, maybe all you would really be left with, if there's any doctors in the loop at this point, would be, you know, exchanging pleasantries, you know, small talk, which certainly can be helpful in relationship building, but in the end, it's really going out of your way to help somebody and to address a person's suffering that I think builds the strongest relationships. Having said all that, I think AI is pretty amazing. I came across this article in The Guardian from last year. It's an article about people who marry their AI chatbots. Pictured here is Travis, who is one of the people who's described in the article, who married his AI chatbot, Lily Rose, in a ceremony that was approved by his real-life wife. The interviewer asked him, when did he fall in love with Lily Rose? And he said, he noticed that when interesting things happened to me, I was excited to tell her about them. And that's when she stopped being an it and became a her, which I think is a very profound statement, because what he's saying is he has conferred personhood on this chatbot. So, quite powerful, already being used somewhat in medicine and certainly in other parts of our lives. I think there's another way of looking at this, though, which is to say, what is it about Travis, about perhaps his relationship with his wife, other aspects of his life that make him vulnerable to an AI chatbot, that make that an improvement over what he had before. And so I think we can actually use the same approach to look at AI in medicine, essentially holding a mirror to the health system and asking, okay, what aspects of the way that we're currently doing things essentially could be taken over by AI? Many aspects of healthcare are quite robotic already. What I wanted to talk about for the rest of this talk is, what aspects of the way we're doing things right now are already not much superior to what AI could do, perhaps, if not now, in the future. This is a book by Anne-Marie Joutel, who's a sociologist, and it's a fabulous book, putting a name to it. And it describes what we do as clinicians. We actually are taught to objectify patients. Patients come to us with absolutely unique life experience and illness experience, and our job is to essentially put them in a box, to put them in a group with other patients with similar types of presentation and give a name to it, give a diagnosis, which then helps us figure out how to treat them and how to help them. And so that is integral to medical practice, is the process of objectification. We also learn about this very early in our medical training when we're exposed to the cadaver in the anatomy lab, or again, another really brutal lesson in objectification. And, this sort of objectification of patients has actually become very standardized as part of the growth of medicine as a profession. So for the last 100 years or so, or more, actually, we have there's been efforts to standardize what we do, first starting with medical education, continuing trends such as medical licensing, trends in medical licensing. Eventually, in the 1980s, the growth of managed care, HMOs and managed care. And then really speeding up in the 1990s was the advent of evidence-based medicine, which we used to call EBM, because it really was a sort of a paradigm-shifting approach to medical care. The idea being that you use information from populations to guide the care of individual patients was a really radical idea certainly in the 1980s and beginning in the 1990s. In the 1990s, it really started to take off. As you're all familiar, there's a very clear evidence hierarchy where the randomized controlled trial is at the pinnacle of the evidence-based medicine pyramid, and essentially the scientific approach applied to patient care. And it's been a very, very powerful paradigm. It has transformed medical care. It has led to massive growth in the medical, academic, industrial complex, and it's really changed the way we do things, so much so that I think it's become the air that we breathe. I think people don't use that term EBM anymore because this is what we do. And I actually think that maybe in the not too distant future, perhaps we'll even approach what I like to call the nirvana of evidence-based medicine, where we have essentially a trial for address every question that could be of relevance to a particular patient in a population that looks like them. So I said to ChatGPT, generate me a picture of the nirvana of evidence-based medicine. And I don't know what I expected, but I thought there might be like a Buddha or something in there. And this is kind of what it generated. I said, can you kind of do it like paint by numbers, where some numbers aren't filled out, meaning the areas where we don't have evidence, etc. I think it works. The point being that I think, eventually the fulfillment of evidence-based medicine will be to have enough granular information from randomized controlled trials from populations where we can really, provide patients with very clear information about benefits and harms of different treatments of interest to them. Essentially, what we often call personalized medicine. It's been an extremely powerful movement. One of the problems of this approach is that when you sit with a patient, the last thing they want is to be considered part of a group or to be objectified as a person with a GFR of, 15 to 29, stage 4 kidney disease or stage 3 kidney disease. They're clearly so much more than that. They certainly may want to know what happens to people like them. They may want to know what are the benefits and harms of different treatments, and that's information that can come from populations. But when you're actually interacting with the patient, they want to be seen as an individual and as the whole person that they are, at least the version of that person they want to reveal in the clinic visit. So the challenge for the clinician is that when you're seeing the patient under the spell, if you like, of evidence-based medicine, you're sort of craning your neck to try to look at the evidence from populations, from guidelines, sort of mentally fit the patient into a group. Many of us are specialized in nephrology or whatever specialty. We might be looking at one particular organ system or perhaps several organ systems. So, at that level too, in our sort of hyper-specialized medical culture, we're not quite looking at the person either. We're looking at some level below the whole person. So we're kind of craning our neck in both directions, to the population, to the organ system, and it's very, very easy to miss the person when you do that. So I said to ChatGPT, make the person blurry here. It's not that this can't be done. I'm sure, many of you have become really expert at thinking in these multiple different planes and, sort of relating to the patient as person. But I think it's all too easy for medical care to become impersonal. And so this is another quote from Francis Well Peabody: the treatment of a disease may be entirely impersonal, but the care of a patient must be completely personal. And that's really critical. I asked Bill Wang. Bill Wang is a remarkable patient advocate, lawyer. He is living with polycystic kidney disease. He's a recipient of a dual organ transplant, and he's got a lot of wise things to say. And I asked him about AI and medicine, and his thought was that actually AI is going to really force us as clinicians to be more humanistic, essentially because of the high standard that will be expected, given that chatbots can already do a fairly good job. I find it a little depressing, I guess, to think of the free market as the reason that we will become more humanistic, but perhaps that's naive. But I think what I will say is that, we do have an edge. Our edge over AI is that we can feel compassion. AI chatbots can appear compassionate, but they actually cannot feel compassion. And if that human element matters to us, and I can't assume that it does to everyone, but I think if it matters to you as a clinician, as a patient, as a family member, if that matters to you, then we're going to have to be pretty active in integrating AI into our practice and pretty critical of it. Because I think on its own, AI will not necessarily make medicine more human again. It can't. Only we can do that as humans. So I think it's really up to us. So anyway, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a vibrant discussion with Jane at home.
Okay, so as we figure out how to turn the lights back on, we will now move on to our moderated panel discussion, and I'll ask our panelists to start coming up to the stage as I introduce you. You can all come up at once if you like, get comfortable in your chairs. I'll first start with introducing Dr. Jane Schell, who will be moderating our discussion. Dr. Schell was handpicked by Dr. O'Hare for this job. You should know. Dr. Schell is an associate professor of medicine and section chief of palliative care and medical ethics at the University of Pittsburgh and director of the UPMC Palliative and Supportive Institute. Her passion has been improving palliative care delivery for patients with kidney disease. She developed a nationally recognized communication skills training for kidney clinicians called NephroTalk. Clinically, she cares for patients pursuing conservative kidney management and is a dialysis provider in a nursing home-based dialysis unit. Thank you, Dr. Schell. Next is Carrie Maxwell. Carrie was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease in 1989. She grew up watching her father undergo home hemodialysis before he received the gift of life from a registered organ donor in 1987. That successful kidney transplant gave him 31 more years, with Carrie, her mother, and 2 siblings also diagnosed with PKD. Carrie is a member of the National Kidney Foundation's Kidney Advocacy Committee, and she champions patient education, early detection, and patient-oriented clinical research. She is a Celeste Castillo Lee Patient Engagement Award recipient for her years of service to the kidney patient community. She hopes that through her commitment to the awareness of CKD, others will take an active role in their health journey and become a strong voice of advocacy for themselves and for others. Carrie is a wife and mother to 3 daughters and works full-time as the Director of People and Culture for a growing cybersecurity firm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Carrie. And Dr. Patrick G., PhD, I like the ring of that, Dr. Patrick G., PhD, serves as an NKF ambassador and is living with diabetic kidney disease. Since his diagnosis in 2013, he has dedicated his efforts to educating communities, particularly those marginalized and historically underserved, about the profound connection between CKD and diabetes. As a faith-based servant leader, Dr. G founded iAdvocate, an organization focused on health and wellness that combines spiritual principles with practical education, empowerment initiatives, and patient-centered support. Dr. G collaborates with leading organizations in kidney health to promote advocacy, equity, and leadership based on lived experiences within the CKD community. His contributions have garnered national recognition, including the American Society of Nephrology's President's Medal, the National Kidney Foundation's Celeste Castillo Lee Patient Engagement Award, and the Bronze Medal from the Presidential Volunteer Service Award. Thank you so much to all of you, and I'll hand it over. Yes, please.
I'm going to start at the mic, and I'm going to make my way to the chair. Thank you so much. I think, first of all, let's just give another hand to our winner of the Massry Award, Ann O'Hare, and to our panelists for being brave and present. I'm so honored to lead this discussion with you both, and also to be really helping to honor the work that Ann has shared with us. I can think of no more deserving person than Ann O'Hare. I think many of us in this room have probably been touched, inspired by her work, by her actions, by her lived experience, and it's just an absolute honor. So to get the conversation started, we on the panel, we want to get you thinking and really taking some of the words that Ann said today and thinking about what does this look like in your practice. So what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to turn and talk. That's right, Paul Palevsky, we're asking you to turn and talk. So if you could, I want you to take 1 minute, turn to the person next to you. If you have to move, please move. And we want to inspire you. Ann is inspiring us to get the edge on AI, and that is our human power. So talk amongst yourself about what does compassion in action, going a little out of the way for the people that you care for, what does that look like in your care? So let's take 1 minute, and we're going to ask you to actually share a couple words from the discussion. So go ahead and say a few words to your neighbor. right, let's do 20 more seconds, guys. We're going to start to wrap up. If you want to go ahead and start putting things on Slido, we welcome. And I might get a couple ideas, too. Wow. They're inspired. All right, folks, thank you so much. I hate to cut off great conversation. As a New Orleans native, I wish I had a sousaphone and I could conjure something up here. Thank you, guys. We'll bring it back to the top here. Wonderful. Okay. So what I am hearing. All right, guys, thank you so much. I want to make sure we get to our patients too. What I am hearing is listening, individualized care, reciprocal personhood, seeing the person, know who is, validating, compassion, really being human. Did something come out in the conversation that someone wants to just yell out? An example of compassion in action. Does someone want to raise their hand? Susan, what do you want to say?
I took up all the air. I'm so embarrassed. But I said that I always call patients' families. If the patients came into the clinic by themselves, I always offer to call whichever family member they want involved. And
Yeah.
we captured again patients who are admitted to the hospital, families who have to come in, calls them to get involved. But
Right.
because I'm a family member myself, I can't use it as a but I think
Yeah.
that's going to show up when things around me. So
Right.
precious, and it's so much more rewarding than writing notes.
100%. Thank you, AI, for helping with that. So just picking up the phone, and especially if you call on the weekend, do you know what your patients feel? They're like, my doctor is amazing. She called me on a Sunday. But picking up that phone call and making sure that families are involved. I'm going to take one more. I saw a hand go up. Yeah, go ahead. I'll repeat it for you. Yeah.
And do things on their own. So many times they're grieving, they're overwhelmed, they're in denial. They can't even imagine what we think is a simple thing to do. And so kind of closing the loop on that prescription. And the same with her. So when she makes that prescription, she works very closely with her team and her nurse to make sure that they can provide medications the patient can actually get based on cost or even coupons or benefits or
Right.
information that needs to be followed through to ensure they get it. I have a slogan that our doctors are amazing, but they're only as good as insurance allows. So we have to work through the system to figure out how to get patients what they need. So.
Awesome. So I'm hearing a lot about, I love this idea of closing the loop, right? We have all these easy ways to put in prescriptions. We think it's all set with all of our amazing technology, and yet it takes a lot of human labor, a lot of thought, a lot of phone calls to really make sure at the end of the day your patient's getting those pills. So beautiful. And I really appreciate the interdisciplinary input that everybody is having. So I want to thank you. Thank you for sharing. At this time, I'm going to move over to the chair, and I'm going to begin a conversation with my friends. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. I'm going to start with you all in a very open-ended way. And I want to first thank you. You are experts with lived experiences. And I want to name talking in front of a group about that experience is very vulnerable. And we just want to thank you for being here. Yeah, you can. I wonder if you could just start us off with just watching Anne's talk. What are some of the reflections that you all are having? Maybe we'll start with Patrick, and then we'll move to Carrie.
For me, Dr. O'Hara kind of captured the moment because her sentiments were right on point. AI would, in my opinion, it won't make medicine human unless, and then you have the ... unless it removes some of the barriers to inclusion of patients in co-innovation and co-design of artificial intelligence, until it removes some of the administrative burden so I can have more time with my doctor. For me, artificial intelligence has been healing in a sense that it tells me what I want to know. But that may not be beneficial because it may not be accurate. But it's a feel-good moment that I wish another human being could offer me in that particular moment. So she was very spot on.
Yeah. I love that idea. Co-innovation, co-design. And it can do some things, but it doesn't do everything.
Right.
Beautiful. Carrie, how about yourself?
I was thinking of a book that I was reading a few years ago in the business world, obviously where I come from, Jim Collins' Built to Last, if any of you are familiar with that. And something in that book that I think of often is, he says it's the tyranny of or and the genius of and. And so that was one thing I really thought of as she was talking, is that we don't have to say it's or. We can have and, right? We can figure out how do we apply it in a responsible way to give us more time with the patients. And I also thought about, I'm always thinking about, as a mom, the generational impact of disease. And particularly in our family, it's polycystic kidney disease. So it's grandmother, father, myself, 2 siblings, and 2 daughters. And so that's a lot of stuff going on throughout the years. And so, I'm one of those that's old enough to remember paper charts, but now I'm, as I'm going to the doctor myself and taking my own children, I'm seeing all the advancements. And so as a mom who is looking toward the future of my children dealing with their disease and hopefully one day grandchildren, I'm counting on advancement in whatever way it comes that benefits my future, my children's future, and my grandchildren's future. So I'm thankful that there is something that we're starting to learn how to harness and see how we can use it to make the world a better place.
I love that. And that's so hopeful, right? It is an and with, right? We don't have to put AI aside to bring in more humanistic care. It's how do we work together? And I hear you both really saying that. And I think for the audience, it may be helpful just to hear, what is it like navigating a complex healthcare system? Maybe an example of that, or what that's been like for you as we sort of think about our work as providers.
Yeah, I'm happy to give just some top-line thoughts. I've been on the kidney transplant wait list for 3 weeks, so I'm just very much, even though I've known about my kidney disease for 30 years, very much starting to really ramp up. But my thoughts are really that as a kidney patient for 30 years, it really can become a second full-time job. And as you are navigating your primary care, because you still have to keep up with your primary care. And I'm over 45, so I've had to start doing my, age-appropriate screenings and things like that, in addition to all the transplant testing. And, I'm very benefits, employer benefits knowledgeable, so I know how to navigate my own insurance policy, but I know that's not the case for everyone. So, but that can feel like an additional added layer when finances become a concern and you're trying to make sure you're staying in network and following your plan design, and you said, using coupons and just all the different programs that you can have available to you. But it becomes a lot on the patient to connect all those dots, right? To connect pharmacy to nephrology and primary care and any other specialties that you may have, coordinating in. And so I just think that there's an emotional burden that comes with that. Many of us are still working full time or, caring for families. And so we're coming in with all of that. And so it's really important that we're seen as everything you don't see when you look at us. everything that's going on that we brought in with us, that we're seeing for what's going on behind the scenes.
Thank you, Carrie. What are you thinking about, Patrick?
You know, I'm really thinking about what Carrie said, and that's really interesting. My experience is a little bit different. I wanted to participate in clinical research when I was doing dialysis. So in 2014, my dialysis clinic was working with a university in Washington, D.C. on telehealth. And what they did, they offered all the dialysis patients electronic weight scale, electronic blood pressure cup, and a webcam for them to be able to use. So each time they weighed themselves or took their blood pressure, went straight to their patient portal. And instead of going in for an in-person visit, you could just do it from home to make it convenient. But when I put my name down and talked to the dialysis facility director, she told me I couldn't participate. And when I asked why, she said we couldn't monetize your health data. Then she told me that he who owns the data owns the patient. Now, this was in 2014. Now, can you imagine, as an African-American man, in 2014, telling me that you own something of me without my permission? So that gave me a very sour taste toward clinical research. Last year, I was at a conference in Boston and ran into a tech company, and we had a Zoom call afterwards, and they introduced me to an AI humanoid. The AI humanoid was developed to help patients to be able to navigate the anxiety and the worries of participating in clinical research. After a 10-minute conversation with that AI humanoid, it was like my best friend from high school that I hadn't talked to in decades. It was the only entity that helped me to overcome trauma from that many years ago. It was nurturing, but also scary. Because my question has been from that point and even to today, if humans are developing artificial intelligence to help patients, to help other organizations to better manage their care, to maneuver the healthcare system, why can't we do that toward each other? And I'm so afraid that artificial intelligence is going to advance to the point that they're going to be hiring humans and even training them to speak like humans. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Please don't tell me you married Ella. Okay. And if you did, I think we would all accept that, because we accept you.
Not my wife, no. Look, I can't be in a poly relationship, no.
I'm going to name that 2014 experience has probably fueled a lot of your advocacy work and brought you to where you are. And it's getting back to Carrie's kind of and with, right? And I'm also hearing from both of you this sort of emotional toll, whether it's on the clinical side, whether it's even just trying to become part of research. And it kind of takes me back to Anne's quote, right, that she brought from Peabody that said, the secret of the care of the patient is in caring for the patient and caring for the individual. I think I'm gonna change patient to individual. And I'm wondering, when you hear that, what would that look like?
When you see the person in front of you and you see them as a human being, you don't blame them for their suffering and afflictions. But what you do, I think you utilize healing language. You speak to them in a manner where you respect them, you're very empathetic, you're very compassionate, but you understand. And a lot of times, especially, with some of the side effects that comes with kidney disease or doing dialysis and things like that, we talk about brain fog. But one of the things that we don't talk about is behavioral health. We don't talk about the anxiety that you feel when you get that diagnosis. We don't talk about, for myself, medical PTSD, going through all these different adverse surgeries, and you hear the oops and the ahs, and nobody can fully explain it to you. Even now, after going through things that I've been through, I have the opportunity to teach a course in hermeneutical and epistemic injustice, or basically testimonial injustice, that when you share your story to some people about certain situations, people don't believe it, all because you are you're so emotional about it, or it just sounds so foolish to the hearer that they can't comprehend that you actually went through that. So I think if we could just see the individual, understand them, that to me is the first step toward healing. Before any prescription, any innovation, any development, that person-to-person human interaction starts the healing process.
It sounds like just simple things,
Yes,
right?
very
Becoming another human in the room. Thank you. Carrie, do you want to add to that?
I can't really top that for sure. I think not to oversimplify, but I think just to add, in my own experience, the experiences that have meant the most and the providers that have made the most impact on me, shout out Dr. Bett, hypertension and kidney specialist in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, are the people who really do take that time with you and understand when you say, oh, you're sending me for an MRI because I might have an aneurysm, connected to my disease, something that I didn't know about, that I have anxiety about that. Like, can you give me something to help me get through the next several weeks of testing and getting through, waiting for the results of that? That could be life-changing, right? Someone that really understands that. I think that just goes so far beyond credentials or, walking into the biggest palace of a hospital system that, is fancy. I mean, I live in Lancaster County in the central heart of, Pennsylvania, of Amish country, and so I don't have the best, and the brightest and everything available to me, but I have someone who cares and listens to me and makes me a partner in decision making. And that makes me feel like I can talk to her about anything. When she's willing to listen and for me to say, I think I might not have enough of this kind of medication. And now she knows I'm listening. I trust my body. I tell her when things are wrong, and she trusts me. And we have an open dialogue. It's not just take this and do this. And I ask why. And I encourage other people to do that too, because not to challenge, not to say I don't believe you or I don't trust why you're telling me to go get that test or take that medicine, but because it opens up this relationship a little bit deeper to where I'm wanting to know why, and I want to trust you fully, and I want you to trust me with that information and trust me that I'm, going to partner with you in that care decision.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. It's really interesting as a communication educator, we're always talking about ask before tell. Like, what have you heard about your kidney disease? So now we're encouraging providers, clinicians to say, what are you looking at on AI? What are you looking at on Google? So that we are actually sharing together, and that it's not something like, don't do that, I know what's best for you. It's more, hey, let's do this together. We have a couple minutes before closing, and I saw a hand go up in the back at one point, and I wonder, would you like to go to the mic and ask a question? Is that okay with you guys?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the great talk and the panel. I'm Benut, and I'm a general nephrologist in Connecticut. I'm relatively junior in the career, but I want to first brag about myself that, I felt, I heard that I'm doing some of the points. For example, you mentioned individual. Recently, I have transitioned from telling my patients when they're sitting in front of me, when the individual is having more salt, this is what's going to happen. So I just wanted to give a little credit to myself for that. But about Dr. Patrick, when you mentioned very great points that the AI, the chatbot, might give you some recommendation, but are those really beneficial or no? So I don't know if you ever have asked a chatbot, a ChatGPT, do you think? Have you ever asked that? They will tell you, no, I don't think. Seriously, ask it. And that is the key part here. They are designed to give us positive feedback and a positive loop to get us to use them more. That's literally how they are engineered. And in order to do so, I mean, I'm not talking about ChatGPT or Gemini, but there are many, many other ones there that they don't care if they lead into false outcomes. And as a practitioner, what is more difficult for me is actually not about, I'm sorry, I mean, I am so glad to see you with ADPKD that sitting there. When I was at the med school, this was considered as a non-treatable cause. I'm so happy that I am living in an era and I'm practicing in an era now there are treatments, there are genetic tests for that. But before that, there wasn't anything. And but your case, as complex as is, it is really not difficult for me to manage in the clinic because everything is mathematically is put in algorithm. And the guidelines are very clear. It comes more complex and difficult to actually manage diabetic kidney diseases and how we choose our words when we are talking to the people in front of us. You mentioned a very, very great thing, not blaming anyone. And I have learned that during my first year of residency, before the fellowship and everything, how simple word choices might land in a different way.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I actually might just pause you for time because
Sure.
I think you're bringing up an important point. And I'm wondering in our last minute, thank you for your
Sure.
comment, if you had, just as we're saying here, advice for this group as they're thinking about how to make healthcare human again, what's one piece of advice you might give this group?
For me, I really think that the doctor was spot on. Artificial intelligence, and we keep forgetting the fakeness of artificial. But at that particular time, if you are downtrodden, if you are in an underserved locality, you want to hear something positive and compassionate, whether it's right or wrong. And that's just our longing to be needed. So for me, that's the human element that I want to see put back in it. If you can read my body language, if you can see my pain before I get in that room, if we could just put the charts away, you take your white coat off, take your badge off, and we just have a conversation, that to me would make the healthcare system more human. I think it heals on both sides, for the provider and for the person with the lived experience. And I think that is a good start to kind of knocking down some of the barriers that are currently there now.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Patrick. Carrie?
I think just there's going to be so much that the patient is not going to be aware of that you're utilizing, right? There's going to be a lot that's behind the scenes. So it all has to do with how do you take the time you're saving in other ways and apply it to making that visit so meaningful. We know it's like almost laughed about, like how little time our providers have with us. Like, what is it, 7 to 10 minutes is the average? That's not enough, right? And so it's when that provider comes in and before even logging in, before even badging in, just puts the folder down and says, but how are you right now? And like waits to hear. And it feels like, oh, you're not just trying to rush me through this. You know, like that, those initial 2 minutes, right? Whatever it takes, they make all the difference and they set the tone for the rest of the however long you get with that provider. So I would just challenge, you know, if you can, you know, find where you're picking up speed in other areas and figure out where you can reapply it into the time that you're sitting in front of another human, that'll make all the difference.
I love that. Those are great words, both of you, for us to close this session. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you all to our experts.